to submit a story, topic, or have any other inquiries, please email submit@skibanewsnation.com. Also, you can email Jeremiah Skiba personally at jeremiah@skibanewsnation.com. Also, email Jake personally at jake@skibanewsnation.com. If you want to write us a letter, send us something, help support us, or just say hi, please send your letter to Jeremiah Skiba, P.O. Box 560-271, The Colony, Texas 75056. If you write us a letter, I'll do my best to write you back. Hey, Skiba News Nation family, thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you never miss an episode of Skiba News Nation. If you want to help support us, please consider becoming a Patreon, where you will get exclusive content, shoutouts, and much more. And you can also support our channel by getting yourself some new Skiba News Nation merch. Thank you for coming on this journey with us as we continue to stay on the quest for truth. Huge shout out to all our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for your support. We couldn't do this show without you. If you want to help support us, go to patreon.com/Skiba News Nation. Also, you can listen to Skiba News Nation podcast on your favorite podcast platform.
What it costs. I want to know what the truth is. And I hope that people, my son, anybody, if my name comes up, whether you like me, whether you agree with me or not, at least you can respect the fact that he's on a quest for truth. He's on a quest for truth.
Welcome to Skiba News Nation, bringing you unfiltered views, news, interviews, discussions, and more. And now, here's your host, Jeremiah Skiba, award-winning musician and son of Rob Skiba.
This interview is not about religious views. This is about our constitutional rights as Americans, and how the government decided to take every right away from the people who died on April 19th, 1993 in Waco, Texas. The purpose of this interview is to give a voice to the people who the media has kept voiceless for so long. This story is their story, and is now being told by the members of their congregation and community to set the record straight. So I invite you to please listen and watch with an open heart and an open mind to the true story of what happened that day in Waco, Texas. Like my father often said, evil happens when good men do nothing. Viewer discretion is advised.
I'm Scott Mabb. I'm 42 years old. I live in Florida. My connection with the Waco tragedy was that I was there from 88, 89 to 92, 93. I'm not sure exact dates. It was a while ago. I was 8 years old when we went there. We were living in Miami at the time when we left to go to Texas, and I was there up until the actual siege on the 28th. I was, however, one of the first kids to leave, like 2 days after the actual initial raid. So I was not there for the 51 day of torture that our government did to those people, thankfully. I was lucky enough to have a father who was in the military at the time, who had the connections to get down there and get us out as soon as possible. Wow. So that was wonderful. But I did lose my stepfather while we were there. Michael Schroeder was off premises and heard the news of what was going on and tried to head back onto the property. And he was, in my 100% belief, executed on his way back in. You can look at all the evidence of it, and I don't see how any sane person can't say there was something that was done wrong in this case. So the incidences with Mike is one of the bigger ones that I like to try to bring up because it's often overlooked. We like to look at all the DK stuff and the FBI stuff and all the fire, the building burning down, all this kind of stuff, and it's like there was a lot more that actually happened that raises a lot of questions.
Well, like my dad was executed too by the tyrannical medical system, and I see so many parallels between the ATF and what they did to you guys and what the medical system did to us. And then they try to make the victims out to be the person who is in the wrong. And so the media jumped upon that and was like, oh, I can't say it on YouTube, but anti this, anti that, and they just tried to make him seem like a like crazy people, which he wasn't. He was the most sane. Yeah, that's exactly what they do, and so I can relate with that part of your story. I mean, I feel like he was definitely murdered, and anybody who's presented the evidence and they deny that the government wasn't at fault is an idiot. I'm sorry, they're delusional.
I saw that clip that you mentioned with Biden, and it infuriated me too.
David Koresh and the Davidians set fire to themselves and committed suicide. The government did not do that.
It's messed up how they try to demonize groups of people. Like, this could have been me, because my family has different beliefs than a lot of people, and it's like, if they're willing to go and attack a group of people for no reason, I mean, you have the right to bear arms. You have the right. We have American rights. We have rights as Americans, as Texans, as people, to defend ourselves. And when they try to demonize a group of people because the government up, it's like they just kind of overlook it. Yeah.
The issue for me personally, as someone who survived the incident, one of the biggest issues I have, and it's parallel with politics today, in that we do this tribal thing where we have one side and then the other side. We have to label these guys versus those guys, and it's like, but we're all the same guys. So why are we doing this thing? And they get into this hyper fixation, kind of like we do with Trump today. No matter what you think about Trump, if you just look at it from outside the box, completely objective, and go, okay, what's going on with this Trump stuff? Because you're slandering all of this hate towards him. Why? Like, okay, yeah, he's not exactly an ideal human being. He's a narcissist, all these things, but then they attribute anything and everything they possibly can come up with to him, like he's this big bad boogeyman. And that's kind of what they did with DK. They made him out, and I'm not going to defend him. I never would. We can get into the discussions and stuff. I am perfectly open to discussing my opinions on, his moral good or bad of things. But they went so much to the extreme of saying that this man, they exaggerated the truth to make it seem like he was worse than he was and able to deflect from their own faults. That's what I see. Because they always talk about, this evil man, this con man, this false messiah, whatever. And it's like, I don't really care how evil DK could have been. Let's assume he was the worst, and he was doing all of the stuff that they claimed that he was doing. That does not excuse what the government did.
Exactly.
And for me, this is the way I look at it too. What is the government's role? What is DK's role? DK's a citizen. He's a human being. All the people who followed him were self-thinking human beings who could make decisions for themselves. But the government is there to serve and protect and provide for its citizens.
Yep.
It didn't do that. So
Nope.
I don't really care what kind of person DK was. The government screwed up royally and never, ever even admitted to any wrongs, much less tried to make it right in any way, shape, or form. They just put all that blame out on DK and the Branch Davidians themselves. It's absurd. My aunt, she butted heads with David a little too much. She didn't I guess she didn't, in the end, didn't believe in a lot of things that he was preaching. So she ended up leaving. She was only there for about a year. She had left like 2 years prior to it happening. So that's something that a lot of people don't realize, that people came and went. A lot of people think, these were hostages or something. It's like, there was never anything along that lines. People came and went. You could go off premises anytime you wish. So I'm like, it blows my mind that you could even imagine that these people would do that. It just shows how little you actually knew about these people. They didn't do their due diligence to try to get to know these people, to try to figure out what would be the best route to finding a peaceful solution to the situation. So, and that's all been put out there. I mean, all the experts, all the religious scholars that have come out and spoke on it and everything, they came in and tried to help the government, and the government refused it.
Can I ask you kind of like about, do you remember the machine shop before it became the swimming pool at Mount Carmel? Somebody asked me to ask you that.
I don't particularly remember the machine shop. I do remember the swimming pool fairly well. I don't really remember exactly when it came about. Like I remember it kind of being constructed. I remember being a little bit excited about, oh, this is cool. We're going to have a pool to play in, because we didn't have bells and whistles of light, all the cool things. We didn't have running water, electricity, that kind of stuff. So having a pool was something that was a bit of a splurge as a child. So
That's awesome. So you were there kind of during the negotiation, since you were one of the first people, quote, negotiated out, right? So what was David's attitude like after getting off the phone with the ATF negotiators? Was he upset? What was he like?
My relationship with David was probably more along the lines of like Kevin Jones's, where we weren't his kids. So anyone who wasn't his kids, because see, me, Kevin, we were roughly the same age. Cyrus was a little bit younger than us, and there was always this. Obviously, Cyrus is the favorite child kind of thing in our group. You have a group of boys who are roughly the same age. We all played together. That's just natural. That's what happens in real life, anywhere, right? So you get these little groups of kids who play together because we're roughly the same age. But then you go, okay, well, this one's David's kid. He gets a little bit favoritism. I always felt that way. I do believe I've heard Kevin say plenty of times very similar things, where we felt not fully part of the inside. Like there was two groups in the group. There was everyone, and then there was David's core group. There were his wives, his children, these types of things. So I definitely didn't have quite a very close relationship with David. I didn't interact with him a whole lot. Also being one of the older boys. Mm-hmm. I think Mark, Kevin's older brother, was a bit older than us, but he was often not around. He was old enough to be going and doing other stuff, I suppose. But I don't remember David ever being irate, mad. He definitely seemed to be. It was weird because as a child, you're experiencing this thing, all this chaos and commotion of the actual firefight on the 28th. But yet, I recall feeling safe and secure. Like I don't remember being scared and panicky or anything like that. But that could also just be, a me thing. I wouldn't say that all the kids were this way. That was just a me thing. I was the oldest of my siblings, so I had a little bit of that, I have to look after my siblings. I was probably a little bit more mature in a sense beyond my age of being a little 8-year-old kid when we got there, and then an 11-year-old when all this happened. You'd think an 11-year-old, you watch stuff on the internet nowadays and you're going, that's a 12-year-old doing this, waving guns around on some TikTok video. And it's like, sometimes you end up having younger kids who have a understanding beyond that age on the average of kids. So I definitely had a demeanor around that whole situation. I don't remember a whole lot of like the 28th till the 2nd, but I also had a very strict upbringing pre-Waco. My parents were, like we said, from a military background, so I was used to a very strict environment. My mom's side of the family was also very religious prior to ever going to Waco, so it was normal for me. I didn't feel, while Waco was different, it still felt like more of the same. And that you had all these strict rules to follow. You had your responsibilities, your chores to do, all these things. It was a very structured upbringing, and that wasn't different. So when we got to Waco, and my interactions with David was kind of more like he was just this other father figure, because, like I said, my parents divorced when I was 4, so I already knew what it was like to have more than one father figure. Yeah. So again, it was just more of the same for me. But I definitely don't recall, him being all mad or anything like that. It was all very calm. He never exuded anything that would make me feel like he didn't want me to leave or anything like that. So it was very much so. I felt like they were doing what was best for me to keep me safe in that environment. And it's ironic. I won't go too far into that one, but I do recall once I left, that's when I started to feel fearful and scared and alone and panicky and all that kind of stuff. So it was a really weird thing for me looking back at it as an adult going, I felt safe while there were, gunshots going all around. But then when I get to this home where they sent all the kids for the parents to come get us and stuff, that's when I'm like, I felt panic. None of the adults were adults that I knew. I'm the oldest. So, that was borderline traumatic to me, more so than anything that ever transpired in Waco.
What were your first impressions of David or your families, do you think, that drew them to being a Branch Davidian or drew them to his ideologies, his teachings? And did he have a strong understanding of the Bible? Do you remember anything about that?
I would say for me, like I said, I grew up in a religious family, so I was used to Sunday school. I'd been to church plenty of times. But for me, again, and this is why I say a lot of things, it's kind of just a me thing. I feel like I've always been an inquisitive person, a curious person, ask questions. I question everything, even my own beliefs and ideals. I love to have debates with people who don't believe the same thing as me, not because it's any kind of, I want to make you think the way I do, really. It's more or less, why do I think the way I think? I'm questioning my own beliefs. So I've always been that way. And I feel like I just kind of, religion to me, just too much of it didn't really sit with me. I've never really been a very religious person. I've considered myself what I label as an anythingist. I believe anything's possible. I have no idea. All I know is that I don't know. But as far as what brought us there, I know my mother's told me the story of my brother found a pamphlet flyer thingy, and then she made contact with Steve and so on and so forth. But I think what would, from the conversations I've had with my mother, as well as my memory of being there, my interactions with David, I would definitely, it makes absolute perfect sense that what was the major thing that drew people to him was what I've seen many people say, and which is another thing that makes you believe it to be the case, is that when you hear the same thing said, it's like, okay, that makes sense then. And that is that he knew that book so freaking well. Like, he had it memorized. He was oddly charismatic. I mean, I'm not anybody who really follows into the whole religious stuff, but he could make you want to listen to it, just the way that he spoke. I remember sitting through these sermons for hours and hours, trying to stay awake just so that we could have the opportunity to maybe have some treat at the end, or he might show a movie or something occasionally. That's, for me, all it was. I was also very hyperactive and ADHD kind of child, so that was difficult for me. I never really liked church because I don't like to sit still. But his ability to communicate what was in the book to each individual person, that was one of the things that my mother told me. He could break it down for each individual person, however that person needed it. Because like we always say, the Bible, you should, take what you need from it. Each person's going to take different things from it and use it to achieve whatever it is that they're trying to do. But David knew that book so freaking well. I've never seen someone, I mean, like I said, I come from a religious background, been to many different churches, and they often go, okay, guys, let's open up to book this, verse that, and the preacher opens it, and he's sitting there reading it out of the book. David just held the book in his hand like a prop. He spouted the stuff out of his head. He didn't need to look at it. So that, I think, that aspect, that visual of seeing him just kind of like he's reading it out of his head, gave this image that he knew the book so well that he was the books to some degree, So that, I think that played a major part in it. A lot of things I can imagine would go into people's minds with their own personal struggles. They're looking for solutions. They're looking for answers. They're praying to God for answers. And then this guy comes along and says things that they've never heard before that make sense to them. It would make sense that would, draw people in.
What about his music? I've
Very
always
good
been
man.
very curious about like him as a musician because I've actually listened to it and it's actually really good. Like he could have had a recording contract in my opinion. Do you remember any stories of or remember hearing him sing? Did he do it every time he preached, or how did that work?
It was definitely a big part of life there. Pretty much any time that it was, hey, everybody, we're going to the church to listen to David preach, whatever we called it at the time. I don't remember. It has been quite a while. So, but it was a big part of it. As people were piling in, often he'd be up there playing around, not doing anything specific, just playing around his guitar. He had obviously other musicians in the group. Thibodeau was drums. He had somebody doing the bass. I don't remember exactly who was on that, but I was always interested in the drums myself. So I took to Tibbs for that reason. My stepdad was also a drummer, and Mike would get up there and drum occasionally if Tibbs was busy or something like that. So I told this story before, I've always had a little love-hate thing with Tibbs, because when I was a child, I wanted to see my stepdad up there because I admired Mike so much. One of the most phenomenal human beings I've ever known.
Yep.
And I admired the hell out of him. And then to see Tibbs up there instead of Mike was a little bit of a thing, but Tibbs was such an awesome guy. He was just a lovable guy. He was so sweet. He played with the kids. He was just an awesome guy and a great drummer. So the music thing was definitely a big part of it. He would often do it prior, as he was, I remember it being more often prior to his sermons. He would get up there and do music as people are piling in and we're gathering. And then he would, launch from his playing into some kind of sermon of whatever he was talking about that day. Occasionally it would even be, like I said, with the pool thing, where we didn't get a lot of fun stuff per se. I remember one specific time where he let Cyrus get up there on the guitar, and then he let Joseph Martinez, I think, the oldest Martinez brother, on the bass. And then I wanted to go on the drums, but I think I was being shy or something. I don't know. My brother Jake, my younger brother, 2 years younger than me, ended up going up there on the drums, and they were three playing around. And of course it was funny because these little 10-year-old, 8-year-old boys who don't know what the hell they're doing, or they're just banging around on stuff. But it was interesting. He definitely, I think, used the musical aspect of life there to go along with a lot of his sermons and preachings and stuff like that. So it was definitely a big part of life there at Waco.
How do you feel about the common media misconceptions and lies? Like, what are your thoughts about the documentaries or the docuseries like the Waco or Waco the Aftermath, or just anything you see? Are there any representations that are correct in your opinion?
I would say it's really hard to make something that fully represents everything correctly. Most of the time, you're going to get some truths and then some things that people didn't know, or they had incorrect and they embellished on this or that. But I will say that the Netflix series was one of the ones that I've liked more than anything else. Not because it was more accurate or inaccurate or anything, but because it humanized people. A lot of times you see these docuseries and it's like the people that they're talking about are just numbers on a screen or digits on some file or something like that. That Netflix series, the way that they tried to Hollywood it up and everything, while had its downsides in that they embellished on some things, but it also really allowed you to go, okay, these were human beings who were experiencing this stuff. So it allows you to kind of put yourself in their shoes and go, okay, what would I do if I were in this scenario? Which you don't really get with a lot more of the just straight up docuseries, where it's more informative. This is the information. This is what's right. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. But the big issue I have with the whole debates of what happened, who's right, who's wrong, is in the end, I've come to, after 30 years of dealing with all this stuff. It's the issue is we're never going to know for sure. Mm-hmm. It's all gone. They killed everybody. So it's dead man can't tell their tale. So that's the issue that I have. I don't think we're ever really going to have closure in knowing for certain what was or wasn't done and what was right or wrong. So,
Jake, do you have any questions? I'll let you ask some of yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing and sharing your perspective. I think coming from a young age through that whole experience, it really gives you a unique perspective, uh, about the whole situation, because you have the perspective of the adults that are there as practitioners and followers of David's teaching, and then you have the family that they bring along with them, and so it's a very different experience there, I think, between the older crowd and the younger crowd. So,
Mhm.
uh, kind of understanding that mindset and understanding how that shaped your worldview today, to me is very interesting. So here's my question: is what you see with Mount Carmel and all the people joining the Branch Davidians from all different areas and moving together and living in community, living kind of in a like a fellowship type situation. We see the government, as things spiraled out of control, they started to double down with how terrible they were saying DK was, and so what's interesting to me is, how do you see the government has turned the situation at Mount Carmel into a warning and a byword against any other people who in today's time frame might wish to live in community, live outside of kind of government influence? What is the agenda there in terms of making you guys an example of, the government doesn't want people living outside of the system. The government doesn't want people cooperating together, being independent, having strong faith and belief, and so could you speak to that and talk about perhaps how the government has used the situation that happened at Mount Carmel for whatever agendas you see through today?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a big subject there, because that's not something that was just a thing back then. I talk to a lot of people that I know nowadays who that's their dream, to go off somewhere away from civilization, buy up some land, start building a self-sufficient property, get their own power, building a water mill, doing all these, growing their own food, having their own chickens and cows, all this stuff, making themselves, like you said, self-sufficient outside of government. Obviously, anyone who has a little bit of intelligence can look at any government throughout history. It's not just the U.S. government. This is all government. It's all about control and keeping the people that it governs in line, so to speak, quote unquote, in line. And I think that it's a good thing to some degree to have this set of rules. Like, I would consider myself slightly anti-government, but it's more like anti-bad government. I don't have a problem with rules and laws and this stuff. You have to have some kind of shared sense of purpose, some shared sense of laws and rules in order to have a civilized society. Otherwise, you just end up with anarchy. I mean, you could make some. I personally believe that in small numbers, you can have a nice community. But once things get too big and the population grows too large, you start to get into these other problems where things need to change. You develop a government. I mean, you can look at the evolution of humans throughout history and see these things naturally just evolve. So there is something to be said for its need. There is a place for government. But the problem is, in a world where humans have been around, civilization has been around for thousands of years, it's developed to the point where it's been convoluted and taken over by all the greedy people who want to be in power. And there's another thing to be said about that only some people really seek that out. One of my favorite sayings is that only someone who doesn't want to be the leader would actually make a good leader. When someone desires to rule others, 99 times out of 100, they're going to be an evil, bad ruler, because they have an ulterior motive to it. And that's kind of what we see in today's world. We have governments running the people, and they don't really have the people's best interest in mind. So I can definitely see what happened in Waco as being something that the government wanted to set an example. I mean, there's other stories than just Waco. I mean, let's not forget, Ruby Ridge. Let's not forget all the other things that have happened throughout history where the government comes in and says, Okay, look, I mean, you can go back even further than that, to the creation of this country. I mean, America was founded on people who said, all right, our government is not doing what we want them to do, so we're out of here. That's literally how this country was created. So there's something to be said for that. You don't want to label yourself as one of the targets.
Oh yeah.
Because, my issue is just I see a lot of people who just blindly believe the government. That's the issue that I see. It's like as much all the examples that we have throughout history where the government hasn't done what's best for the people, and the very same people who will sit there and go, the government is corrupt, will then turn and go, oh, well, we should listen to what the judge says versus what someone else says. I'm going, but wait, you just said the government's corrupt. That judge is part of government. So that one just really irks me, and listening to people who it's long, very deep thing there, but it's a troublesome matter, that's for sure.
Now, I will say when we did the 30th anniversary thing, it was interesting getting both perspectives from both sides, because we didn't let anybody know from on Mount Carmel that we were going to this, and it was like so eye-opening and so amazing just to be able to meet you guys and just to be there. Totally different atmosphere than what was going on there. Yeah,
it's that's the thing too, where as your co-host here, is it Jake?
Yeah,
Jake, what you said earlier about the unique perspectives. That the one thing where I believe that my experience and my views towards what had happened, as well as having actually been there, is very, very unique, is that I'm the only person, I believe, that I know of anyway, who after the fact, after Waco, then served in the military. Obviously, my mother had served prior. There was probably other people there who may have served that then went. But of any of the kids who were there who then got out, I think I'm the only one who's served in the military since then. So I kind of learned what the military is like and what it means to be a government employee and all this stuff. I've had many people who go, I can't believe you actually went and served the government after what they did to you, kind of thing. And it's like, enlisting in the Air Force doesn't really serve the government. It's also, I knew I wasn't going to stay in. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got out of high school. I did a year of junior college. It's like not really sure what I wanted to do with my life. So coming from a military family, the easy option was to enlist. So I did that, but I was all but certain that I wasn't the type of person who wanted to sign up for 20 years. I did my 4 years and got out. One of the big reasons being, I can't follow orders unless I believe in the order. So that whole idea of it is, there's truth to what is said when you hear stories about how they break you down in basic training and rebuild you as they want you. There is absolute truth to that. I've been through Waco. I've been through some things in my life, and going through basic training was tough. It was very, very tough. They mentally break you down. They try to physically break you down. Luckily, I was an athlete in high school and stuff, and the physical side of things was actually fun to me. I enjoyed the physical things, but they broke you down mentally, and that was really tough. I'm not an emotional person, but they had me in tears one time. They were threatened to recycle me. So they really try to reprogram you to follow directions, essentially. It's the simplest way of place. Follow directions, do what you're told. And for me, like I was saying before, I'm a question everything kind of person. So if you give me an order, go do this, go do that, the first thing that goes through my mind is why? What is the purpose of what you're telling me? What is the end goal here? So I knew if I ever was given an order that I didn't quite believe in, I wouldn't be able to follow it, and I'm just not that type of military person. So I did, however, learn what it's like. So I gained a perspective of someone who's in the military. I gained a perspective of the ATF agents, of the FBI, of these people on the ground. And one of the reasons why I don't personally fault the people on the ground at Waco, even though they're the ones who pulled the trigger, is because I know what it's like to be propagandized. to be told this, and that about some people, and you don't know. You're going into this situation. You don't know who these people are. All you know is what your boss, your head guy's telling you, your officer above you, whatever it may be. He's telling you these things, and you just have to go with it. So I understand that perspective. So I personally don't fault any of them, because they were made to believe that what they were doing was right. And it's actually interesting that I bring that up, and then I just think about it. It parallels something else in today's politics, and that is our Biden versus Trump division that we have going. People who, because I'm more of a centrist type person. I can look at both sides of things and go, okay, you guys are right about this, but wrong about that. You guys are right about that, but wrong about this. And I wish you guys could see that and stop arguing over stupid things. But the reason that it's parallel is that I can look at the Trump base or the Biden base and go, or Dems, reps, right, left, however you want to label things. I hate labels personally, but it has a function in society, I suppose. But I can see where you can go, okay, these are a bunch of people. Like, there was no such thing as MAGA country prior to Trump, but there was. There already was. This was a whole group of people who believed that their government didn't have their best interest in mind. And when the whole Trump thing came around, initially Trump was looked at as this joke. It was, oh, this is this ego narcissist billionaire guy. This is just a joke for publicity and stuff. And everybody was laughing at it, no matter what side of the aisle you were on. We're like, this is not a serious thing. But then it manifested into more and more. And the people who go, okay, this guy's talking about draining the swamp. That became his big thing in the beginning. Drain the swamp, drain the swamp. So anyone who believed that that was something that needed to happen latched on to that. So I understand the perspectives of people, even if I may not agree with what they think is the correct action moving forward. And you can have a good perspective. Draining the swamp is a good perspective, in my opinion. We have a lot of corrupt people in politics. We need to get them all out of there. But that doesn't mean we should, firebomb the White House or, do all these other crazy things. Yeah, I can agree with what you see as a problem, but disagree with your solution. And that's what I see with what happened with Waco. It was, okay, let's assume that DK was doing things inappropriate or that he shouldn't have been doing. But what's your solution? The solution is not to send a whole bunch of armed people into a compound armed with armed people. And I use the word compound there because that's what our government loved to do. They love to use words to manipulate people's opinions. Let's call it a compound instead of a community. I mean, the thing was made out, I was there when we built that building. I helped build that building. It was built out of cardboard. It was not a compound in any way, shape, or form. They were building some bunker stuff underground for protection, but they don't talk about that when we're calling it a compound. They're talking about this big old fort-looking thing. It was boards and 2x4s built out of. It wasn't even like new wood. It was old wood that we disassembled from houses and built it here. But they love to use these trigger words to manipulate the perspective of the viewers, of the rest of America. Because as long as we can get America behind us, then we're justified in whatever we do, and there's plenty of parallels with that throughout history as well. So
that was well put.
Yeah.
I think the word game that is used, the spellcraft, you could say, that is using spelling and words and writing, to deceive the masses or to lead them in a certain mindset, and looking at the situation in the 90s that happened with you and all the people at Mount Carmel, it kind of sets a precedence because they hadn't perfected the craft back then, I feel. But we are entering into an age where not only is online censorship and the tailoring of information a whole nother level than it was back then, because we have, one, the gift of the internet and the porous exchange of information through all these media platforms, but also we now have the computing technology and the government agencies that have their fingers in all that technology that was a blessing, but can now then be used for skewing narratives. And so I think, if anything, what happened at Mount Carmel is a flag of warning to the populace of not only the United States but the world on how information is a deadly weapon and tool that can be used to make situations like this justified. And I think you're right. In the end, there's going to be a lot of questions that we'll never have answered because those people died and they took their story with them. But on the other hand, just like you said, there is truth in both sides. I mean, when you were describing your military training and how it allowed you to have the insight to see what those ATF agents kind of probably were experiencing, they were just following orders. They were just doing their job, and kind of seeing that you can recognize the two sides of the coin. It's very very interesting, very very important for people to see that we kind of all fall for our own deceptions depending on the situation that we're in. You know, you had the followers of David Koresh who were perhaps deceived, you know, into sticking around, or for whatever reason, because of their love of David or their, whatever was happening there that allowed that tragedy to unfold, where they stuck around and then were eventually killed by, the ATF agents and burning down the building pretty much. All together, it really shows a picture that I think people can apply to today's world, like you were saying.
Scott, if there's anything else that you just want to tell us truth.
You just want me to rant?
I mean, I want you to tell your truth. I mean, everybody has their truth. So.
Oh yeah, that's actually. I'll start with that one. Truth. It's an interesting word. Personally, I believe that there are two kinds of truths. There are subjective truths and there are objective truths. An example of an objective truth is the grass is green and the sky is blue. How do I know that it's an objective truth? Well, because you and I both look at it and it's green, sky's blue. Everybody all sees it the same. When we all share the same truth, it becomes an objective truth. But there are things that we don't share. They all tend to be in the realm of beliefs, experiences that one had. For example, Waco, the experience that was, a lot of the truths that survivors may give or government personnel may give often are subjective truths because it's personal to them, because they can't corroborate it with anyone else. Objective truths require corroboration. Subjective truths, however, do not. Someone tells you a story about something they experienced and they believe that it was because of X, Y, and Z. Well, that's a subjective truth. He believes it to be true, but he can't corroborate it with someone else because we don't have that. So it's very important that whenever we talk about truth, what is the truth, what happened, what didn't happen, all these things, that we identify the difference between the two of them. The objective truth is that the building burned down. That's an objective truth. We all agree. No one argues the fact that building burnt down. The subjective truth would be what caused it to burn down. There are plenty of disagreements on what caused the building to burn down. Now, you may get 100 people who all agree on one subjective truth of what happened, but then when you have another 100 people who disagree with it, you can't corroborate it and make it an objective truth when you have too much pushback. This is why I'm such a big science person, because I love the scientific method. The scientific method is all about finding objectivity. I take something that I think is right, wrong, true, whatever, and I go, well, how do I verify that that's actually the truth and that's not just my own perception?
It's like
DNA. Let me call up my buddy over here. Yes. Let me call up my buddy and have him check it and have him do whatever research it is that I'm doing. He finds the same result. And we go, wow, that's interesting. Maybe this is true. Wait, let's be a little bit better, though, and let's call in another buddy and have him do it. Let's do this over and over and over. And that's why I love the scientific method, because that's what it's about. It's about making sure that we're positive that this is the correct answer. All the while, and this is the key thing that people love to kind of ignore when we talk about science versus religion versus politics, all these things, big subject in today's society because of things like climate change. We talk about whether, science has an answer to this or whatnot. But we always seem to forget that when it comes down to science, because you got people the media loves to call science deniers and stuff. There's all the while we create this objective truth, we still leave ourselves open for adjusting or modifying that truth later if given additional information. That's the biggest and most important thing. Let's take a little bit more information and go, oh, well, that modifies what we thought about this or that. So when you take, for example, in something like this situation with Waco, and you go, okay, objectively, we can say this was a peaceful people who weren't really bothering nobody. They weren't doing anything to anybody else. They were minding their own business. The government came in. They said, we think he might be doing some stuff he shouldn't be doing. And then they came in guns a-blazing. Okay, objectively, everyone can look at the whole story and say that that's the objective truth. Now, the problem is that we go, well, what happens when we gain additional information? What happens when we learn that, well, why did they go? Oh, we learned the story about the mailman and the grenade and all these things. And you go, okay, well, maybe they were doing something they weren't supposed to. Maybe there were illegal weapons. Okay, so now we're changing what our objective truth is. And that's the thing that people seem to forget. They get stuck. They go, okay, this is the truth, and I'm never going to change that. Truth can change. What we think is true can be changed as due to gaining better or more information. So that's something that always needs to be kept in mind when talking about truths. And that I love that you have the truth seeker thing there, because honestly, we should all be truth seekers. That's what I'm all about too. I love that you have that, because that's what it is for me. I want truths.
I'll send you one.
Truths.
I'll send you one of these.
I love it. It's the objective truths that matter, because subjective truths are subjective. I'm okay with debating religion and stuff like that, but for me personally, that's subjective things, and there's really nothing constructive that can come about by arguing over different religious beliefs and stuff like that. But objectively, can we debate what would be a better way for us to power our society, whether we should use carbon fuel or fuel from the ground, whatever, fossil fuels, or whether we should look into nuclear or renewable powers? That's an objective thing that we can talk about and discuss. So those are far more fruitful discussions to me. So truth is something that we always need to keep our mind open to. What kind of truth are we talking about? So I love that one.
Thank you for sharing that.
I guess it brings up the big, ultimate question people have been asking, for eons, right? Is morality subjective? Or is it objective?
Yes.
Is morality as defined by a creator in heaven, right? Or, because we can all, who are from the outside looking in, right? But then of course the counter narrative is pointing fingers at the other side, and so it's definitely
that's the problematic thing that I see with politics today, is that whole pointing fingers thing. And instead of having an honest discussion about some subject, we go, oh, well, it's his fault. No, it's his fault. And it becomes this blame game thing that detracts from us ever actually constructively progressing. I've always thought of myself as a progressive person by what the word means, progressive, to get better, to take what we have and improve it. That's what it means to be progressive to me. And I hate where our politics goes with they love to stick political ideologies with words like that. And that's, again, I think that's just manipulation of words, what our media and government loves to do with things, to manipulate people's perspective of things. But yeah, it's important that we know what we're talking about when we have these debates, because like you were saying too, the internet. Oh, the internet. What I could say about the internet, man. Greatest invention of my lifetime. I was born in 81, so I came of age after Waco. I get with my dad, and he's got a computer, and I haven't seen one in forever. I think they were in their infancy and everything. And I dove right in. I loved technology. I fell in love with the internet, the ability to to have all this information at your fingertip, all the things that you hear said positive about the internet. But in 30 years of the internet being around, I've watched it change. I've watched, I used to go to Google and I would type in something that I'm looking for. I need a good recipe or a good picture for something to draw. I need a recipe for this, or what was the purpose of this thing? And after 30 years of the internet being around, I feel like the problem with it is it's diluted. There is just too much junk on the internet now that it's really hard to find things. I used to be able to type in, 2 or 3 words to search something and find what I was looking for. Now I feel like I have to put in 18 words to try to make the search engine find exactly, and I have to be so much more specific. So, and then we could get into the whole thing about algorithms and how does things get, presented to you and all that kind of stuff. Plus the issue that arises with, let's make it personalized to you. So we're going to show you things that we think you like based on the things that you've clicked on. I mean, the internet itself is its own echo chamber. And whether we think that that's good, I think the problem is that we should look at the actual realistic result. Who cares about whether the purpose is, and this is parallel to so many issues that I see in society too, with like, take the establishment, for example. We look at, we got all these corrupt people. You get all these, for lack of better words, because our society loves to use this when I will use the term conspiracy theory, which we can discuss that one for a little bit if we wanted to. But we get these conspiracy theories, and the issue is that you get them such that they say, all these people at the top, the rich people are controlling. They have an agenda. They have all these goals to all the different ones that pop around, the eugenicist stuff, the control over people in general. And the issue is you don't really have to have a coordinated attempt to do something. The issue is it could just be in their best interest. If I've got guy number 1 and guy number 2, and their goals are the same, they could be completely oblivious to each other's existence, but be working together because their goal is the same. So there doesn't need to be an Illuminati or a cabinet of people at the top trying to, having meetings of, like what was the guy from the Dr. Evil. You don't have to have a Dr. Evil table with all your generals and planning out these things. It could just be each individual person doing what they find to be in their best interest, which is a bunch of greedy people and corruption doing these things. So we get lost in all this stuff. But the internet does that. The internet has become a problem because it lets people get lost in the amount of overflow of information that there is. And I've watched anyone I'm sure many people feel the same way. I've seen it in so many places where you've watched the things change over time. And it's hard to actually show that to other people. It's hard to say, okay, well, here we can sit down and watch this thing together and objectively have the same perspective, because it's changed now. I mean, if you've ever looked at the dictionary, like the Webster's Dictionary, look at the definition of the word racism. It's not the same as it was 20 years ago.
Yep.
They've changed the words in the definition, like literally gone in and changed the words. But I can't just show that to you now unless you're someone who's been on the internet for a long time, taking data and, have a backlog of information showing this. But then we get into all the problems of whether or not we believe this and fake stuff and all. And I think AI is going to be a major problem.
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like
throw everything out the woods.
With your whole DNA science thing, I mean, that's going to mess up a lot of cases. I think is AI, because they can put they could put you anywhere. They could say you did this, and we have video of you, and then the DNA just goes right out the window, and it's like we're moving forward, now we're moving backwards.
That was always one of the things that I always said was I want to see footage. Like if you want to tell me something happened, then show me footage of it. And nowadays I'm going, I don't know that I can actually say that anymore. Now I don't know if I can trust that footage. So what the hell do we trust? If I
have
wasn't
one last
there, I don't
question,
know.
Jeremiah.
Oh.
I did want to ask how would have the situation have been different if the internet existed in the 90s? What would DK's ministry and streaming, and if he was plopped from the 90s to here in 2024, right? How would have things gone down differently? And in that situation, just because
That's a very,
he had the
very
platform.
interesting question. That is, I don't think I've ever heard that thought before. That's a very interesting one. One thing I would say that would be different was the coverage. Obviously, people inside the compound would have had our cell phones out recording it. They would have had theirs out there. We would have had a lot more footage of what happened. It would have been a lot harder to hide. I think we would have more answers than we do. There'd be less unknowns as to what actually transpired. But as far as the whole thing, I don't think it would have changed too much, largely because the people who were there, the Branch Davidians themselves, the internet's not going to change what they believe. What they want to go and listen to David talk. And I don't think it would have changed much of that, but it would have changed the story that we know after the fact. That's where the impact that would have had. Had we had the internet, it would have been, we would have had more information. And that's the big issue with Waco. 30 years later, it's going, well, we don't have enough information. We've got all these bits and pieces of information. We've got photos of the door with, tank tracks rolled across it and stuff like that. But we're missing a lot of information. There's so many things that just aren't there. And largely that's because of what we said before, that dead men can't tell their story. So
yeah, how fascinating to
tragedy.
see Waco, the event there, as a staple in history right before the internet changed everything. So it will be likely the last thing on the historical docket in terms of a situation that was publicized, that was used by the government. There was not enough information, but if people had cell phones and if people had the ability to tell that story, so it's funny because it's almost like now in 2024 our technology in a way protects us, but also it can threaten us, as we talked about before.
It can be used against us. Yeah.
So
totally agree
right,
there.
Jeremiah, that's all for
that concept is scary.
So our producer Opa wanted me to ask, what are you doing now? Like,
my life now,
yeah,
as chaotic and troublesome as anyone's. The economy's difficult. I'm a father of 2 girls, but I separated from their mother, so I'm living the single parent life that most everyone can relate to these days. That might be a parent. Struggling to get back up on my feet since the separation from their mother. But every day I have those 2 girls there to keep me going. So I care about society and the world in the future. I always have. I've always been a science person. I love the concept of seeing this race, this species progress. Like I said, I view myself as a progressive person. I want to see us fucking explore the stars. So that would just be awesome. But I fear whether or not we're capable of that as a species. And I started to become very, very, what's the proper terms in social media lingo? Nihilist or black-pilled? Not optimistic. I started to become very pessimistic about the future of the species based on things that I experienced, all the stuff that I've seen, my own personal life experiences. Good people suffering, bad people succeeding. It's a very backwards world. I became very, very pessimistic. But then I had 2 kids, and now I kind of have to care. So I fear for the future that they will grow up into. I really do believe that there is still hope for this species and this planet as a whole, but it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work. And I think one of the biggest things that will help that will be combating media propaganda and agenda and narrative, and that's where teams like Skiba here come into play. Do proper journalism. Any journalist type person or entity that I would ever speak to, the one thing I would tell them is, that's why I brought up that truth seeker thing. That's what it's about. That is the role of media. The government is up here, the people are down here. The media is supposed to be in between, telling us what's going on. And the mainstream media has become more or less just another arm of the government, which is the big problem. So that's why I love to see alt media becoming big nowadays. I'm big on YouTube. I love alt media sources because I know they're not bought and paid for until they become bought and paid for, and then you have to, watch out for those things. So
we'll never be bought and paid for. I can promise you that.
So what did you do in the service?
I was a radio maintenance technician. So I learned electronics. I learned about computers and stuff. So, but I mean, what did I do on a day-to-day basis? Nothing. Another problem that I could go on for days and days with government spending. I'm never going to knock what enlisted people do every day, but I mean, I'm not going to lie. I sat there on the computer and played fantasy football half the time. So there's an issue with where we put our time and money when it comes to, people talk about government spending all the time. They go, oh, well, we need to, they talk about budgets. We love to talk about budgets all the time. Oh, this related to Waco, the FBI budget or the ATF budget that was coming around, these issues that arise with budgets. But I don't see people talk enough about, okay, well, your budget's $50 billion. Well, where is that $50 billion going? Like, exactly. I want to see receipts. Like, that's what the American people should have. We should have receipts for every dollar that our government spends, because that's our money.
Yep.
They get it from us. And so we need transparency in government spending. But yeah, I learned electronics. I grew up a little bit for 4 years, essentially. Got out on my own, tried to figure out life. It was a great experience. I did a year in Korea. That was different. So I've been overseas now, experienced a totally different culture. It helped give me the open-minded, broad perspective that I have. Like we were saying before with the Waco stuff, it wasn't just a little bit of a little 3-year section of my life. My whole life has been little sections of 3-4 years of different things. So, and I like that. I'm not really, I'm kind of ADHD, as you can see. I talk with my hands and stuff. So it gives me perspective of things. I love, if you've ever seen the movie Short Circuit, Johnny Five, the little robot, and he's doing this thing where he goes input, input, input. He's just trying to learn things. I've always compared myself to that. I'm a sponge. I just love information. So doing new things and experiencing new things, and that's what largely what I got out of the military was learning things that I hadn't learned before and gaining perspectives on life. So it's
Awesome,
a good
man.
thing, and I would actually say I would recommend it for anybody that's coming out of high school that doesn't really know what they want to do with themselves yet. I mean, do 4 years. You ain't got to do life. Don't got to do 20. Don't do a career. I don't, if that's your thing, but it's a halfway step from getting out of your parents' house to then becoming your own independent adult and taking over your own life, taking control of your life. So,
All right,
so
man.
it was a
Well,
good experience.
thank you for sharing your story with us, and we appreciate you coming
Absolutely.
on the show. And you're more than welcome to always come back. Just let me know, and we'll have you back on.
Well, I appreciate you guys.
All right, man.
We'll be in touch.
Later.
Good to talk.
Yeah, have a good day, man.
You
Keep
too.
telling the truth.
We'll do. To submit a story, topic, or have any other inquiries, please email submit@skibanewsnation.com. Also, you can email Jeremiah Skiba personally at jeremiah@skibanewsnation.com. Also, email Jake personally at jake@skibanewsnation.com. If you want to write us a letter, send us something, help support us, or just say hi, please send your letter to Jeremiah Skiba, P.O. Box 560-271, The Colony, Texas 75056. If you write us a letter, I'll do my best to write you back. Hey, Skiba News Nation family, thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you never miss an episode of Skiba News Nation. If you want to help support us, please consider becoming a Patreon, where you will get exclusive content, shoutouts, and much more. And you can also support our channel by getting yourself some new Skiba News Nation merch. Thank you for coming on this journey with us as we continue to stay on the quest for truth. Huge shout out to all our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for your support. We couldn't do this show without you. If you want to help support us, go to patreon.com/Skiba News Nation. Also, you can listen to Skiba News Nation podcast on your favorite podcast platform.